3 iPads and a phone, and I look like I really know what I'm doing with the computers.
Looks can be deceiving.
They can be.
The rest of the committee wants to come on screen. We're just about ready to go. We're missing Carol still.
Oh, she was on.
Yeah.
I was going to say we are live now on live streaming.
Okay. And well, we'll get started. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Committee of Adjustment for this May the 3rd. And here in Loyalist Township, this is an electronic meeting. So as usual, all rules of procedure, code of conduct, etc., still apply to this meeting. If any member of the committee loses their connection, then we shall pause for a moment to allow that committee member to rejoin. But assuming we have quorum, after a few minutes, we will continue even in the absence of that member. It is of note that Councillor Parks was with us and seems to have lost connection at this time, but I'm assuming she will rejoin shortly. With that, meeting is called to order. It is 6 p.m. and the first order on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Okay. We have the agenda before us. Committee, do we have any edits or amendments to the agenda? Councillor Tate, committee member, Mr. Townend.
No adjustments, Your Worship. I was going to motion to adopt the agenda.
And I'll take that motion. Do I have a seconder for that? And Mr. Hagedorn, thank you. Okay, any comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Any opposed? Thank you, Mr. Buderick.
Just had to close the door, sir. Sorry about that.
Not a problem.
Right.
Okay. With that, the agenda is adopted. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? And Mr. Buderick, go ahead.
I am close enough in relation geographically to 5.1 that the township saw fit that I see a letter of this public meeting. So I believe I should consider that a conflict of interest.
And so noted. Thank you. And we'll ask you to step out when the time comes. Okay. Is there any other notices of disclosure of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? Seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of the Committee of Adjustment minutes from February the 1st. We have the minutes before us. Are there any errors or omissions noted? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve those minutes, please? Mr. Townend, seconded by Mr. Gordon. Thank you. Any comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Right. We move into the first public meeting, item 5.1, D13-003-2021 regarding 77 Manitou. And I believe we have a report before us. And Mr. Voss, are you going to be speaking to this?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So my apologies. I was just trying to work with somebody who's trying to log in. I'm wondering if Debbie, if you are able to, would you be able to call this person who's trying to attend?
I can.
I will forward you the email or the phone number and
Thank
let her
you.
know that you'll be calling.
Okay.
Excuse me for one moment, everybody. I'm just going to notify the participant.
Not a problem.
Hi there, everyone. Sorry about that. Hopefully she's able to break through here and get on connected. So this particular application, so we have 3 applications before us this evening. I'll just put on my video, apologize. We have 3 applications before us this evening for Kenlar Investments. They have a location at Manitou Crescent and then 2 locations at Amherst Drive. The first one I'm speaking to is for 77 Manitou Crescent. They have a little different a layout at this particular location. I know that there are several people perhaps waiting today, or at least have voiced some concerns about the applications at the Amherst Drive location. And I just want to let them know that those applications will be spoken to in a few minutes. And then they'll have a chance to speak if they wish. So the 77 Manitou application, it's located in Amherstview. The variance is to reduce the minimum gross floor area requirement for a 1-bedroom dwelling in a low-rise apartment dwelling house, and that is for the apartment located at 77B Manitou Crescent West. So there's currently 3 apartment buildings on the site and 58 townhouse type dwellings. So this particular application pertains to adding 2 new units to the entire property. That's 1 unit per property located at 77B and also 77C on the property itself. So the variance is actually looking at a reduction in the gross floor area for the 1-bedroom apartment that's being proposed at 77B, just to clarify the location. The applicant has provided a planning justification letter produced by IBI Group to support the application. It's included in the package. The subject property is designated medium density residential in the official plan and also residential type 5 in the township zoning bylaw. As committee knows, when we review a minor variance, we need to look at the provincial policy statement as well as the tests of the Planning Act. The 4 tests for those in the audience are to see if the proposal meets the intent of the zoning bylaw as well as the official plan, and whether the application is desirable and whether it is minor in nature. In terms of the provincial policy statement, this application serves to further promote the efficient use of existing development by allowing existing floor space in the building to be renovated and then be used as living space. A minor reduction in the minimum gross floor area requirement for the 1-bedroom unit is not viewed as having any negative impact in the functionality of the units, nor the apartment dwelling or the complex in general. It promotes a range and mix of housing types, and the relief being requested is not expected to impact the parking and amenity spaces at the location. Staff have reviewed the area in regard to parking, in terms of common areas, amenity space, drainage, and road compatibility, and we have no concerns in regard to public health and safety, and consider the proposal consistent with the provincial policy statement. Looking further into the four tests, we reviewed the official plan. The residential use is recognized in both the County of Lennox and Addington and Township official plans. The proposal promotes a range of housing types, the improvement of existing housing, and supports the goal of appropriate intensification in residential urban areas. We also reviewed the parking situation in the area. It was deemed that there is satisfactory parking available at the location. The proposed reduction in the minimum gross floor area is not expected to impact the residential uses of the subject property nor the neighboring properties, and therefore feel that the intent of the official plan is met. So that satisfies the first test. In terms of the second test, does the variance maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw? The planning justification letter outlines how the proposal meets all other zoning requirements except for the one bedroom unit, which is designed to be just under the minimum gross floor area requirement, therefore requiring a variance. As the unit meets Ontario Building Code specifications, the functionality of the proposed unit is going to be maintained, and therefore staff are satisfied with that. The justification letter sufficiently illustrates that any effects to amenity space and play area on the property will be negligible, and that the existing on-site open space appears to be sufficient to support the additional development. One of the things we notice is that there is an overabundance of regular parking available on the site. While there's not a requirement in the variance application, we still have to look at the AODA, in other words, Ontario Disabilities Act, to see if there are any effects that will happen to the or be required for the existing parking. And it was determined that one additional AODA parking space would be required. The applicant has committed to repainting the existing spaces to accommodate parking concerns. Because there's minimal impact expected on the residential uses and the neighboring properties and also the existing residents, it's the opinion of staff that the proposal meets the intent of the zoning bylaw. So that satisfies the second test. In terms of the third test, is the variance a desirable use of land, building, or structure? This alteration will not require additions to any of the existing buildings or any change to the actual site characteristics, so nothing external on the property. The provision of the 2 additional units on site will contribute to a range of mix and housing options as supported by the provincial policy statement and both official plans. There is sufficient amenity space and parking spaces to accommodate the 2 new dwellings without compromising the housing options as supported by the provincial policy. Sorry, I must have missed something there. There is a sufficient amenity space and parking spaces to accommodate the 2 new dwellings without compromising the residential uses of the site and neighboring properties. The requested zoning relief to reduce the dwelling unit area from one proposed new unit for the one proposed new unit is considered appropriate because it will meet Ontario Building Code requirements. Planning staff are therefore of the opinion that it constitutes a good use of the land. That satisfies the third test. In terms of the fourth test, is the variance minor in nature? The alterations will not be actually visible from outside of the buildings. The conversion of locker and storage space is not seen to impact the existing residential uses and the actual residential functionality of the buildings and the site itself. They meet the Ontario Building Code requirements, providing functional living space, and therefore staff consider the request minor in nature. There are no concerns that have been raised by any of the departments or agencies in this regard. At the time of this report, only one tenant had called in from the Manitou location regarding this application and made an inquiry just to clarify some information. Apparently it had been posted to Facebook, and there was some misunderstanding as to which application it was pertaining to. It was pertaining to a different application, so I clarified it with the requester. So the planning staff therefore are recommending approval of this application.
Thank you, Mr. Voss. Committee, do we have any questions for Mr. Voss with regards to this application? And I'm seeing none. At this time, I'll go to the public. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to the 77 Manitou application? And I'll ask if you do, I'll ask you to indicate by putting your hand up in the virtual meeting. And to the clerk, go ahead.
So we've have the individual in. We're just making sure that she's able to hear. And I'm not positive which actual item. I know we've talked about it, of which item she was talking to. Peter, do you know? Is it this one or?
She'll be speaking to the Amherst Drive application,
Okay.
I believe.
All right, so she's going to try that. Sorry.
Okay. And a second call, is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak regarding the 77 Manitou application? I see a hand up from, I believe, Ms. Gilchrist. Are we able to open that up for Ms. Gilchrist? Thank you. Ms. Gilchrist, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can. Good evening.
Good evening. Would you like to speak to the 77 Manitou application?
Yes, I would just like to introduce myself as the agent for the owner and to let you know that I'm here. If there are any questions that come up, I'm available to answer questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have the applicant present, or the agent of the applicant present. If there's no one else in the audience who wishes, oh, I see another hand. Ms. Powder. Are we able to bring, oh, Ms. Simpson. Ms. Simpson, are you here to speak to the 77 Manitou issue?
I think they moved on me. 1 second.
Working on the technical difficulties. I see Latoya Powder.
Yeah, hi. I'm just here to represent Kenlar Investments in the event there's any questions similar to that.
A representative of the owner. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak to the application at 77 Manitou? And I am seeing none. Council, do you have any questions for either the staff or the applicant or the applicant's agent? Seeing none, we have an application. We have a recommendation before us from staff. Ms. Porter, go ahead.
Yes, I move to receive the application and adopt the recommendations.
Motion to receive and adopt. Do I have a seconder for that? Mr. Townend, thank you. Okay, mover, any comment?
Yeah, as we all know, we're in an affordable housing crisis right now across the province and probably across on Canada. And I think anything that we can do to promote more affordable housing is a good thing. And making units smaller seems to be the trend in the way that major cities have found that route to increase the supply and thus bring the prices down for people. I know several young people that can't find anywhere to live right now, and it is a crying shame. And we have to do what we can to promote affordable housing.
Thank you. Seconder, any comment? Nothing further. Anyone else have comment? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Any opposed? And motion is carried. Thank you. We move on to the second item on the agenda, which is item 5.2 D13004 2021 regarding 103 to 107 Amherst Drive. We have a report before us, and I believe Mr. Voss has a story to tell us on this one as well.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. So this application is for 103 and 107 Amherst Drive. Just for everyone's, I'm sure everyone here is on committee is aware that the 103 and 107 Amherst Drive is right next door to the next application that is also being addressed. There's a whole line of apartment buildings and townhouse complexes in that area. There's two different properties that are involved, 103 and 107 being one of them, and the other ones are just, it's one property from there to the west. So some of the people who are, most of the people who have brought forth any comments in regard to these, the applications are looking at the complex of as a together unit, and not all of them are aware that they are actually separate applications and separate properties. So for those who have brought up forth comments, as I go through the report, you'll realize that we had some comments that had come in, and I guess it's up to the applicants as to what they want to address for the which application. Most of them that I was aware of were for the last application that I'll be speaking to after this application. So just to clarify that for the people who are listening in. So this application that we're going through right now is for 103 and 107 Amherst Drive. It's one property. Kenlar Investments has the 3 variance applications. We've already gone through the one at Manitou Crescent, and now this is the first at Amherst Drive. And they're all similar in that we're looking at a change of interior floor space to be converted to living space. For some background, the entire complex of buildings, this particular property is developed by 2 apartment buildings. It is the owner's intention to develop a total of 2 units within the existing apartment buildings. That's 1 at each of those buildings. The new units are proposed within existing areas, which are currently being used for storage and locker space. The tenants and I should mention that the tenants in the neighboring apartment buildings to the west have relayed some concerns in terms of the use of the actual locker storage. And while I haven't received one for this particular application, they did speak to the site in general for the complex in terms of the children's play area and amenity spaces and so forth that are kind of shared between the 2 properties. So we're aware from the people who have spoken that there's currently an ongoing landlord and tenant tribunal case that's involving the use of lockers at some of these locations. While I have not received a comment for this particular location, I just wanted to make sure the committee and the public were aware. This proposal concerns the internal conversion of existing floor area being storage and locker space in both buildings to create 1 new bachelor apartment in each of the buildings. The applicant is requesting a reduction in the children's play area zoning requirement, and that's being reduced from 140 square meters to 90 square meters to reflect the existing children's play area conditions on site. A reduction in the parking requirement, and they're also asking for a reduction in the parking requirement from 5 spaces to 0 spaces. And this will allow the conversion of those existing floor areas to be create that 1 additional bachelor dwelling unit in each of the buildings. It's important that to note that the apartment buildings that were actually built many years before the actual zoning bylaw. And for that reason, staff can only look at the requirements, the zoning requirements in terms of the proposed new units according to the zoning provisions. So we're just looking for accommodations to make sure there's enough for the 2 additional units. Another thing to note is that at the time that these buildings were created, there was no requirement for the children's play area in the zoning bylaw at that time. And therefore, this is considered a legal non-conforming use for the property. A planning justification letter was again provided by I Group and has been included in support of the application. When the committee is considering the minor variance, as stated earlier, we look at the provincial policy statement and the 4 tests. Looking at the provincial policy statement, we feel that the introduction of the 2 additional bachelor units on the property further serves to promote a range of mix of housing types. It also promotes the efficient use of existing development by allowing existing floor space to be built without actually altering any of the buildings or putting any add-ons onto the buildings or changing the site characteristics in general from the outside. The reduction of the children's play area requirement being requested is not expected to impact existing patterns for children's play in the area. For everyone's knowledge, a 90 square meter play area has been placed on site and installed in 2020. And there's a nearby sports field across Upper Park Drive known as Willie Pratt Sports Field. So staff have reviewed the available children's play area in the vicinity and are of the opinion that the existing amenities are sufficient to support the apartment and the tenants, both current and proposed, and therefore consider the proposal consistent with the provincial policy statement. In looking at the first test of the Planning Act, we need to look at the official plan. The residential uses are both recognized in the county and Loyalist Township official plans. The plans are also support the proposal by promoting a range of housing types, the improvement of existing housing, and supports the goal of appropriate intensification in residential urban areas. The variance supports city goals related to transportation and also being available, the viability of public transit, as this location is directly on a Kingston Transit route. The proposal also supports the township's goal related to housing supply and affordability by creating additional apartment units, which are typically the most affordable unit type out there. Parking was also reviewed under this application and determined that 3 additional parking spaces and 1 additional Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act parking space would be required for the 2 additional units. Staff are satisfied that existing parking conditions are sufficient to support the tenants in the apartment buildings. The proposed reduction in the minimum parking requirement is not anticipated to have any negative impacts on current tenants, abutting apartment buildings or lands and roadways in the vicinity. Staff are therefore feel that the official plan considerations are satisfying the first test. In terms of the second test, does the variance meet the intent of the zoning bylaw? The applicant is requesting to reduce the children's play area zoning requirement from 140 square meters to 90 square meters. As mentioned earlier, this was just created recently, but there is actually no requirement for them to have a play area at the location. And they are also asking to reduce the parking requirements from 5 spaces to 0 spaces to accommodate the repurposing of the existing floor space in the apartment buildings. The apartment buildings, as mentioned, predate the zoning bylaw, and as a result, we can only look at the 2 units, the 2 new units. I just want to note to everyone that the township doesn't actually have any policies in regard to or the ability to regulate any of the use of locker areas within the buildings themselves. As a result, looking at the zoning bylaw, the children's play area is recognized in the minor variance to reflect the existing conditions of the site. And the additional 2 units is not anticipated to increase the demand for the children's play area, especially since we're looking at potentially 1 adult in each of the 2 units. So that's, we don't see an increased demand for the children's play area. It would appear that the existing amenity and parking areas have served the tenants adequately with little known interference to neighboring roadways and properties. We did a little circulation internally to see if there are any issues that were raised in that regard, and no concerns were raised by the various departments. We also note that Willie Pratt Sports Field is nearby, which also adds an additional play space for those tenants in the area to use. The existing site amenity space appears to be sufficient as well to support the additional development. In regard to the parking requirements, the zoning bylaw states that a parking deficiency is not required to be made up for a building or structure that has insufficient parking at the time of the bylaw. Currently, there's about 92 regular parking spaces and 5 special vehicle parking spaces. It's been determined that an additional 3 regular parking spaces and no additional special vehicle parking spaces were required, as outlined in Appendix 1 of the zoning compliance or of the justification letter that was provided to the township. A variance is being sought for a total of 5 parking spaces, which includes 3 spaces for the 2 new units, and also an additional 2 parking spaces will be used to create the new Type A AODA accessible parking space. While the AODA is not a requirement for the variance itself, it is a requirement at building permit stage, and therefore we also had to look at it in terms of whether or not the parking was going to be affected in any way. The AOD requirements are therefore satisfied as they meet the Ontario Building Code at the time when a building permit will be taken. Staff consider the zoning relief being requested to be minor in nature, and any concern in regard to public safety and effects to residential nature of the property have been considered. The proposal is not considered to detract from the residential use of the apartment buildings, nor the site or the neighboring properties and uses. Considering the minimal impact that's expected as a result of the proposed renovations on the residential uses, neighboring properties, and also the existing residents, it's the opinion of staff that the amenity and parking relief being requested to allow the interior alterations meets the intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. That satisfies the second test. In terms of the desirability, is the variance desirable for the land use? The proposed interior alterations will not require additions to the existing buildings or change to the subject property site characteristics. 2 additional units on site will contribute to a range and mix of housing options that is supported in the provincial policy statement and township and county official plans. The proposal also promotes the township goals related to transportation policies, related to transit, and also to residential urban intensification principles. There's no anticipated change to the use of existing amenity space and minimal expected change to parking characteristics of the site. There is no anticipated compromise to the residential uses of the site and the uses associated with the neighboring properties, and for that reason, we consider it a good use of land. Just a note on the use of the actual amenity space, and a lot of people were commenting on the use of or they were under the impression that perhaps the play area on site was going to be removed or minimized in some way, just because of the way that the variance is written into the application. But this is not the case. There's actually no change going to be expected to any of the amenity spaces or the existing play structure at this particular location. The final test, we're going to look at whether it's minor in nature, that the 2 additional bachelor units will be not be seen from the outside of the buildings and can be accommodated as there is an adequate lot area, adequate parking spaces and amenity spaces. Very little impact is expected for the functionality of the units. It's not anticipated that the parking demand will exceed the parking spaces, and it's not anticipated that the use of the playground will change in any way. for committee's note, the notice of this particular meeting was distributed in the normal fashion, which involves a notice to all the property owners within 120 meters of the subject property and posted in front of the site along Amherst Drive. So there was one at each of the locations. In this case, one in front of 103 and 107 Amherst Drive. We had to do a double check on the drive-by because of some of the current concerns that were related to us. We wanted to make sure that there was sufficient notice. We had received some information from the neighboring application tenants regarding the complex that there wasn't sufficient, or they weren't notified by the actual owner on site. The Planning Act just specifies that we need to place a general notice at the roadside, as well as the notify neighboring owners. So that was fulfilled in this case. We did notice on Friday that the notice had been missing, so we made sure that a new notice went up at that time. So just so you're aware. So in this case, we have again, we never received any direct comments on this particular application. We have received general comments about the use of the play structure and also questions about the amenity space at these locations from a variety of people who view the entire area as a complex. But in terms of directly, nothing in terms of this direct application. So staff are of the opinion that this is a suitable use, and therefore are recommending approval of the application.
Thank you, Mr. Voss. I'll turn to the committee. Are there any questions with regard to this application? And Ms. Parks, go ahead.
I'm not sure who this gets directed to, whether it should be through the chair to either Ms. Powder or Ms. Gilchrist. I noticed from the drawings that the laundry room is going to be reduced. Existing facilities right now, 3 washers and 3 dryers, and what is the proposed going to accommodate?
Are we able to the clerk, are we able to bring in Ms. Powder? There we are. And Ms. Powder, were you able to hear the question?
I did hear the question. I think the plans are more to like reorientate to allow for the renovation. But I'd have to double check.
Ms. Parks?
Okay, just as a follow-up to that, and I think this is probably directed to Mr. Voss, based on, I think what you had said earlier, any of these interior sort of modifications don't fall under the Committee of Adjustment. So changes to the particular laundry room wouldn't be part of this? Or we would have no jurisdiction over that?
Mr. Voss, are you able to answer that?
To my knowledge, it's not a requirement. I think because we're not adjusting so because the storage units are not a question, and that there's still a unit inside for the washing facilities, to me that doesn't trigger a site plan kind of application review of any kind. And if I'm speaking out of place, maybe Andrea can pipe in here because she's more involved with the site plan side of things, but I don't believe it triggers anything on our end.
Ms. Furness, would you like to jump in?
Yep, sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, these in accordance with our site plan bylaw, it was determined these applications don't have to go through the site plan approval process. So we wouldn't be reviewing the interior conditions based on these minor variances, only the unit requirements based on the zoning bylaw to add one more. So the land use planning considerations in terms of parking, there are amenity space requirements, not just the outside children's play area, but all apartment buildings have minimum amenity space requirements within the building itself. And they were able to comply with that. So the zoning doesn't get into that kind of details about specific amenity areas and X amount of laundry rooms or those kind of pieces. So if there's any sort of code requirements in that regard, then anything else would be captured in the building permit stage in accordance with the building review. But
Okay, Ms. Parks, is that good?
Yes, that's good. So I guess what I was just trying to confirm is that this would be something that the tenants would have to deal with through the landlord tenant board to appeal.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the committee? I'm seeing none. At this time, I will turn to the public. If there's any member in the audience who wishes to speak for or against this application, please raise a hand, make yourself known to the clerk, and be free to speak to us. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to this application?
Chair, I'm just going to unmute Ms. Ruiz because I believe she may have wanted to talk and she just may not be able to raise hands. So I'm just going to allow her to talk.
Thank you. Go ahead. Ms. Ruiz, are you able to hear us and respond? Do you have any comments or questions at this time?
I can hear everybody. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, but just barely.
Okay, sorry. I'm new to this. So I do have some questions and concerns regarding the building of 141 Amherst Drive.
Okay, that is not this application, but I'll take your questions at this time, and if we need to, we can move it over to the other application.
Okay, perfect. I just want to say that I am a current tenant of Kenlar Properties. I live at 141 Amherst Drive. Last week, it was brought to my attention from a homeowner that there would be a meeting tonight, and it regards the renovations in my building. I feel that Kenlar really should have a little bit of a discrimination there. They really should have, just because I'm not a homeowner doesn't mean they should not have let me know what's going on in my building. I don't walk around during COVID looking at signs out on the street, wondering if my house or my apartment is going to be swept out under my feet. To be honest, the storage space that they're speaking of, I have a Brock King lease, and in my Brock King lease, it states that I get storage and I get parking. I have a claim right now. So they're claiming that this space is unused space. I very much use this space. I sent Peter Voss pictures today of my storage locker, as well as my key that unlocks my storage locker. So yeah, I filed my T2 and we have been adjudicated in January, and then we were adjudicated until April. And then I called again this April and they told me that we are pending because of COVID. I don't understand how they can apply to build a storage locker in a space that I am currently using. I'm also concerned that building this, they're going to be increasing my rent more than the legal 4%, claiming that this is going to be like an upgrade to my building, when in fact I'm actually losing a great deal. Sorry, just getting ahead of myself here. Kenlar came in in March of 2019, and all of a sudden sent out, apparently just posted some notice saying, we're taking away the storage lockers. So when I noticed that, I went and filed my tribunal. After that, they just went and locked everybody out. I had to call tribunal to make sure that they would get them to come back and unlock my storage locker. I don't feel that this is really okay behavior. I spoke to the landlord tenant board and she said, even if this build is approved, as soon as Kenlar tries to remove any of my belongings from my storage locker, I'm to call the OPP and they will not be legally allowed to tamper with any of my stuff until a judge makes a decision. Kenlar Investment is building for profit housing. They're not affordable housing at $1,500 a month, plus $85 parking, plus $150 a month for air conditioning for a unit, or $500 for a season, $30 for a window fan, which isn't even legal, by the way. You're not allowed to charge people for that. The majority of Brock King leaseholders, including myself, were marginalized. By taking our storage from, which is in my lease, they're going to be putting me at an economical disadvantage. I don't understand how they can go and they build a unit when the majority of their units aren't even in use as it is. They claim that they're not making any external changes, but my storage locker has no window. And under a fire and safety, like, does it not have to have a window, which means you have to build through the wall, which then goes to the external part of the building? I could be wrong. Regarding the parking problem, we do have a parking problem. There's generally not enough down the street. But half that problem is when they have people working here, they leave their vehicles overnight in our parking. We have people in our building because it's $85 a month. They don't want to pay for 2-3 spots. So we've got people parking outside for free and just taking up spots. And they don't do anything. When you complain, they're like, well, we can't do anything. In regards to the green storage space being reduced, I've been here for 5.5 years. With COVID, that has been my saving grace. In the summer, I cannot afford $500 to put one air conditioner in my house. I can't. That's too much. My daughter and I are too hot in the apartment, so we go and sit outside in the back space just to stay cool. That's where my daughter has been doing school because I can't stay inside all the time. I'm not allowed to go see family. I'm not allowed out of my house. This little play structure that they've built doesn't even accommodate me or my daughter. My daughter's way past that. And the field that's been there has been there forever. The park that's been there is something that we've always had use to. So they're taking our green space away. That's not okay. Sorry, I'm trying to find where I was in my. So basically, in closing, I would like to note that Lennox and Addington has a disproportionately high rate of economical disadvantaged individuals, including a high rate of child poverty. The county prides itself in providing equal, affordable housing and providing access to services. By allowing Kenlar to follow through with the plan, you're kind of contradicting your values, placing Brock King leaseholders, including myself, at an economical disadvantage in the name of profit. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ruiz. We appreciate your attendance tonight. I believe that your comments are relevant to 103 to 107, as well as the other application that we're coming to. And I will ask our staff member to respond to the issues of the play space that was addressed, as well as I'll say the building code issue of windows, et cetera, that was brought up by Ms. Ruiz.
Also, if you need, like, for my if you need a copy of like the TE2 that I filed for that space or anything, like, just email me. I can definitely provide that information.
Yeah. I appreciate that, Ms. Ruiz. Unfortunately, I have to agree with the staff member previous comment that landlord-tenant jurisdiction is outside of the jurisdiction of this committee of adjustment, but the questions that I've forwarded to staff at this time are well within the township's jurisdiction. Mr. Voss, are you able to speak to those?
I can speak to this play space, and I think I mentioned it in the report. The play spaces for the I'll speak to the two properties because they're, unfortunately, we haven't spoken to the other application yet. But on this particular property, there is a play structure that was placed into installed in 2020. The applicant, because of the age of the buildings, there was no requirement to actually have a play space. And there's nothing in site plan that would trigger us to have a site plan review that would have a requirement at this stage. So the structure that is there is seen as an additional amenity by staff. As well, there is, we've looked at the neighboring uses to kind of compensate for some of the children's place structure that some people view as being minimal for that area. And the concerns are understood because it's quite confusing to external parties looking in. However, there is, to my knowledge, no requirement for, because it's a non-conforming structure, legal at the time. That there's no requirement that this is an additional structure. So in these applications, what the applicant is trying to do is legitimize these structures just to kind of enforce that they were never really part of the requirement in the first place.
Okay.
And the question with regard to windows in the building, would that be addressed under a building permit process?
I'm trying to recall what was the issue with the window permit. Windows.
Ms. Ruiz indicated that the storage areas don't currently have windows, but would need them if they're being developed as residential units, and how that would affect the exterior.
What I know at the moment is that these have been reviewed by our building staff as well, and I've been assured that they meet the proposal will meet the Ontario Building Code requirements. I cannot recall right now if there is a window involved in that particular application. I'll just take a quick look here.
And Ms. Furness, you're able to speak to it?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the any interior renovations, they do have to go through the building permit process. So if there's anything within the unit that does not, the proposed unit that does not comply with building code, then a permit will not be issued.
Thank you.
And just to clarify, I've looked at the drawing a little closer, and it is small, but it does say that the new windows will be added to the rooms.
Okay, thank you. And that was Ms. Ruiz. Is there any other member of the audience who wishes to speak to this application for 103 to 107 Amherst Drive? I'm seeing no other public members wishing to speak. I'll turn back to the committee. Committee, do we have any follow-up questions or comments with regard to this? Ms. Porter, go ahead.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Voss. You mentioned in your presentation that there is a park close by. How close is the park and green space to this unit, to these units?
So this particular application is located at 103, 107 Amherst Drive, which is at the corner of Upper Park Drive, the northwest corner of Upper Park Drive. Just to the east of that is the water tower, and then there's the Willie Pratt Sports Field. So I'd say within under, I forget the exact number, but it's under, from the corner of the property, it'd be under 100 meters.
Okay, Councillor Porter, or Ms. Porter, sorry. Any other member of the committee wish to make comment or question? Seeing none, and do we have a motion? Any member of the committee wish to make a motion with regard to the recommendation? Ms. Porter, go ahead.
Yes, I'll move to receive the report and adopt the recommendations from staff.
So moved. Do I have a seconder? Mr. Townend, thank you. Ms. Porter, do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, I mean, the Ms. Ruiz, sorry if I got your name, brought some very important points up. Many of them are outside our purview. And in regards to the park and the play area, I think it's quite reasonable. Under 100 meters is not an outrageous walk even for a young child.
Thank you. Seconder, any comment? Anyone else have comment before I call it? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. And we move to the third item, 5.3, which is D13-005-2021 with regard to 111 through 187 and 225 to 229 Amherst Drive. And we have a report before us, and I'm assuming it's a very similar report, Mr. Voss. Maybe we can just hit the highlights.
Sure. Yes, it is. It is a very similar report. This particular location is spread along to the west of the area what we just spoke to. They are asking to reduce the children's play area, in this case, from 140 square meters to 0 square meters, and that is because there is no structure on the site. There is no zoning requirement on the site as well, and as it existed as a non-conforming structure in the site didn't have a requirement for the children's play area. So this is more or less to establish the existing conditions on the site. They're also asking for a reduction in the 2-bedroom dwelling unit area from 70 square meters to 59 square meters for 1 unit in each of the 2 buildings located at 229 Amherst Drive. Sorry, I thought I heard something.
Go ahead.
So those 2 buildings are asking for 2 2-bedroom units, and the rest of the units are asking, there's 11 other units that are buildings that are asking for 1 unit each having a new proposal for a 1 bachelor unit. So that's a total of 13 units altogether, 2 2-bedrooms, and the rest of them bachelor units. So again, because we had to look at the parking requirements. We also had to look at the special vehicle parking requirements, very similar to the last application. And so now the applicant is asking to reduce the parking requirement from 22 regular spaces to 0 spaces. And that's because some of that will need to be accommodating for the special vehicle parking requirement, that there's another 1 more space that is required, and they're asking for relief from that. And the rest of it will be done through line painting on the premises. The key things to note here. So again, 13 units are being proposed to be affected. Most of those are bachelor units that are being proposed, and against what appear to be, or the applicant has stated as underutilized storage space. So once again, we have to look at the 4 tests of the Planning Act, including the provincial policy statement. Looking at the provincial policy statement, we again see that this promotes a range of and mix of housing in an area that needs it. As well, there's not anticipated to be any negative impact to the functionality of the proposed dwelling units, as well as the residential apartments on the site. It promotes the efficient use of existing development by allowing existing floor space in the building to be renovated to living space. And this is without the need for doing an external or site plan changes or external changes to any additions to the buildings. The reduction of the play area is not expected to be impacted from any of the existing patterns that we see in the area, because there's going to be no change to the children's play area that is there right at the neighboring property that the whole complex uses. And we also have the park again in the vicinity of the Willie Pratt Sports Field. So staff are of the opinion that the proposal meets because there appears to be as adequate a children's play area in the vicinity, as well as there's no change in uses or expected negative effects to the regular residential uses. Looking at the official plan, the first test, the residential uses are recognized in both the county and township official plans. The justification letter that was provided also speaks to the viability of public transit in the area and the intensification in that area that is supported both by our plans, the official plans. The parking areas were looked at, and we looked at, I already spoke to those requirements. So we feel that the proposal does meet the intent of the official plan. That satisfies the first test. In terms of the second test, we look at the zoning bylaw. Once again, because the zoning bylaw states that the buildings that are built or predate the zoning bylaw, we can only look at the requirements for the new units. So that would be the 13 proposed units. Considering most of those are bachelor units, once again, we're expecting 1 adult per unit, so it shouldn't see any majority or change to the children's play area. In terms of the parking requirements, we feel that there's sufficient parking at the area because the area has been, to our knowledge anyway, sufficiently used and sufficiently supported the apartment buildings there and not seem to be a significant increase. And there's also other options in the area in terms of transit, and you're also in Amherst, so you're closer to different commercial and facilities and so forth, but those people are looking more at active transportation such as biking and walking and going to different facilities. In terms of we had to go through a full analysis of the parking, and there appears to be the applicant is again looking to repaint and also provide an AODO parking space to accommodate the increase in parking. So we consider the application to be minor in nature, and we've looked at the public safety and effects of the residential nature of the property and neighboring properties. Don't see any major issues, and therefore consider there's going to be a minimal impact is expected for the proposed renovations, and therefore meets the intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. That satisfies the second test. Looking at the variance as a desirable use of land. Once again, the interior space conversions are kind of promoted through our different variety of plans. We'll be providing a different range and mix of housing options that is supported in the provincial policy statement and township official plans. There's transit in the area, which also speaks to residential and urban intensification principles. And we don't expect a great change in the children's play area or and there is no proposed change to the amenity space on this property. For that reason, we believe that's a good use of land, building, and structure. Satisfying the third test. Is it minor in nature? We feel that these alterations will not be seen from the exterior or the public. Parking concerns have been addressed, as well as the children's play area. It is not changing, so what's currently there, we feel will still support the existing tenants and future tenants of these apartments. Especially with the nearby sports fields. So staff considered the request minor in nature. We also, we did receive several comments in regard to this application from the public. Some of them were attached, some of them were addressed. So we had several up to about, up to 11 or 12 comments were received, and most of them were addressed just over a phone call to try to discuss the variety of issues on the complex itself. And some of the concerns were brought forward in the report. Once again, the notices were placed on the site and verified last Friday that they were still there, and it was for this particular application. And I understand there are still, there potentially could be some others who may want to speak to this application. With that, staff are basically recommending the approval of this application.
Thank you, Mr. Voss. Committee, do we have any questions for Mr. Voss at this time? And seeing none, I go to the public. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address an issue with regard to 111 to 187 or 225 to 229 Amherst Drive and this application? And I'm seeing none. Oh, I have a hand up with Mr. Mundell. Is the clerk able to invite Mr. Mundell in? Mr. Mundell,
Yes,
welcome and please make your comments.
I just had a question mostly to do with the children's play area at the end of Manitou. Notice I received says it's going from 140 square meters to 0. Could you just clarify what the proposed plans are for that space?
Mr. Voss, are you able to address that?
Yes, I hope so. The application, this is very much planning language in which we are actually specifically speaking to zoning bylaw requirements. So the zoning bylaw requirement is 140 square meters for a newly built site plan where a child structure of that size would be required. In this case, the buildings as themselves did not have that requirement because they were built before the bylaw, and because of that, it did not have a requirement for a children's play structure. The actual application did not trigger a site plan review of any kind, so there's not as expected to be a great change in the usage of the child play in the general vicinity, and there is no current on that particular site. There's no current children's play area, so it's basically recognizing the existing state of the non-conforming use that was legal at the time when the buildings were created.
Does that help, Mr. Mundell?
I believe so. So there's no planned building or anything like that for that space? Because my concern is that green space is used by a great number of children in the neighborhood, not only for the units, but I know of people that live on Littlefield and even further as far as Snow Hill play space during the summer for whether it's playing ball, frisbee, whichever, flying kites. And to lose that green space would be I think a detrimental loss to the area.
Mr. Mundell, if I may just to clarify, are you referring to the space that is immediately opposite the end of Manitou on Amherst Drive, I'll say to the west of the apartment units?
That's correct.
Okay. And Mr. Voss, is that actually part of the property that we're addressing today?
I'm not even sure of the location that was just described. So there are two applications right now spanning from 103 Amherst Drive down to 229. That's just north of Manitou. That's at the Manitou Crescent intersection. So all I know is there's one parking space, one play area that is actually located at in front of 103 and 107. So that's the northwest corner of Upper Park and
understood. In the drawings in the documentation on page 32 of 45, it shows an outline around the apartments. The space that Mr. Mundell is referring to is immediately west of that property. I'm not sure it is actually property of this company. It may well be township property. I'm not positive on that.
Okay.
There is a space there that I believe is owned by the township. It's a grassed area, yeah, and it's not part of this application nor the property itself.
All right.
So that would not be changing based on this application.
Okay, correct. Excellent. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you. And is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak to this application? I'm seeing none. I come back to the committee if you have any questions or would like to put forward a motion. Now we have a recommendation before us. Does anyone wish to make a motion? I'll go to Mr. Townend.
Motion to receive and adopt the recommendations.
Motion to receive and adopt the recommendation. I'll take that motion. Do I have a seconder for that? Mr. Hagedorn, thank you. And mover, any comment? Seconder, any comment? Anyone else have comment? Seeing none, I do recognize that there's landlord-tenant jurisdiction involved in the concerns brought forward, and I hope that those are rectified quickly by the landlord-tenant tribunal, but that unfortunately is not part of the mandate for the Committee of Adjustment at this time. Okay. If there's any final comments, I will call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. If there's anything else for the good of the committee? Seeing none, our next committee meeting is scheduled for June the 7th, 2021. And with that, I would ask for a motion to adjourn. Mr. Buderek, seconded by Ms. Parks. And I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Any opposed? Motion is carried. We are adjourned. We are about to move into the committee of the whole. I will ask for the members of the committee and the members of council to join into that meeting as quickly as possible. But I'll say that we'll start that for about 7:15 with apologies to those members in the audience who are here to attend the committee of the whole meeting. But let's give 5 minutes to get that one going. Madam Clerk, go ahead.
It may be a bit more because I'll have to convert this meeting before I'm able to start the next meeting. So I'll try and it'll go as fast as it can, but hopefully it'll be for 7:15.
Understood. If it has to be a little bit past 7:15, then so be it. Thank you
I'll get it
all.
up as soon as I can.
Thank you. We'll see you in a few minutes.